welcome to another episode of Unturned Stones. On today's podcast, I'm going to be interviewing Justin Kubeck.
Hi there.
I've known Justin for quite a bit now because I actually met him originally through his brother, who was one of my powerlifting partners back in the day. And
yeah, it's been at least, 10 years now?
Yeah, right around that time, like 11 years ago was probably when I met Josh. And during that time, like I just mentioned, me and Josh were powerlifting together, got to know you a little bit. And then through that time, you have to stay connected. And recently, you've been doing some stuff that's been mental health related. And
yeah, kind of adjacent to what you got going on here.
I think even when we talked back in the day, I knew you were kind of somebody who was aware of your mental health and like had some similar battles I myself was going through. So
I was just starting to kind of figure that out for myself when we met.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yep. So then when you recently kind of started your little venture being more on the business side of mental health, because now you have a company called
Feronus. Yeah, that's my shirt today too.
So actually, here to start, let's have you do a little introduction for people about yourself, where you're from, how old you are, what you're doing, and we'll kind of dive into it from there.
Sounds good. My name is Justin Kubeck. I'm the founder of Feronus. I'm from Waukesha, Wisconsin, and I'm 32 years old. I'm diagnosed with ADHD, and life has kind of taken me all over the place. A quick background, I've worked in grocery, I've worked in industrial kind of fabrication, I've worked in quality control, I've been a wedding DJ, I've been a bartender, I've been a waiter, I've been a chef. Now I'm a sales rep. I've been all over the place as far as professional career goes. I don't know what else you want to know.
Well, okay, no, that's a good intro. So like kind of just diving from there. So you grew up in Waukesha County, a little bit of that small country, a little bit, but like Waukesha still obviously like pretty densely populated too.
It's funny because Waukesha I say it has a small town mentality, although it's not a small town anymore. And it's true. If you get into like the downtown community, it is a very, very tight knit community. You'd have no idea it's a town of 60, 70,000 people, because when you're on Main Street, everybody knows everybody.
Yeah. So your family, your dad and mom were originally from Waukesha area?
No. So my mom and dad they went to Sussex Hamilton.
Okay.
So I suppose near, but
very close. Yeah.
Yeah. My dad did live in Pennsylvania for a short time.
Okay. Okay, cool. So like what was early childhood like for you growing up in Waukesha County in Waukesha?
Quiet suburbia kind of life. My parents weren't a huge fan of technology, so I probably played outside a bit more than your average kid. My dad's also very much an outdoorsman. We did a lot of hunting, so spent a lot of time outdoors, and got to learn how to use my hands too. Like in the summertime when I was a kid, we spent every other weekend up in Door County, and my toys for that weekend would either be the woods around the cabin or the scrap wood bin and a hammer and some nails, and I could maybe make something. So fairly average, because that also balanced out with access to internet at like 10, 11 years old, and video games I was always drawn to, even though didn't always get the support from my parents on that.
So it's like, okay, like you and Josh are both people that when you see you, like your presence as people, like you guys have this very manly presence, you're big bodied people, you're hairy, you got big beards, maybe not big beards, but like, you guys give off like your initial look is you guys are these very big masculine men, right? And do you think that comes from outside of the physical trait of the fact that you guys are just physically big? You guys have big, you guys have beards, you guys are very manly looking men. Do you feel like there's any of that comes from your dad then? Like your dad being kind of a very manly man, him especially like your dad's a very handy guy. He knows how to do a lot of stuff. Your dad's your dad's classically a manly man.
My dad's like a man's man sort of guy.
He'll fix the car, he'll fix the house, he'll fix the
Exactly. And, so, a lot of the mentality of, I'll just figure out how to do it myself. If that's considered manly, then yeah, I definitely get that from my dad.
Okay.
It's the idea of what is and isn't manly, especially in 2025, has changed so much. And like one thing that I built my business on that I didn't even really realize until after somebody kind of pointed it out. It was actually an article written about me where they said I was turning my vulnerability into my greatest strength, and understanding how, being vulnerable and you can still be manly and be vulnerable, and it's actually for the better.
Yeah. So growing up for you, did you feel like you were able to be vulnerable, or did you feel like there was you had to kind of hold back vulnerability at a younger age?
A little of both. I mean, my dad wasn't exactly the most supportive guy when I was a kid. I was very close to my mother as a child. I still am very close to my mom today, and my dad and I have a much better relationship now that I'm an adult. But as a kid, I would express myself when I had to, when I would just have an outburst or something like that. But there were a lot of times that I kept things under wraps.
Okay. Did you ever I know for you, a lot of your mental health journey were like being diagnosed with ADHD came at a later point. But do you remember thinking you were like battling any mental health issues? And obviously that was in the 90s for us, right?
Yeah.
So there's a time where it really wasn't being talked about. But
So, I mean, a lot of people don't know this story. I actually, and I'm not formally diagnosed, but I personally believe I'm on the autism spectrum. I've talked to my doctors about it. They seemingly agree, but there's no benefit to me getting a diagnosis, so it's not something I'm really trying to pursue. And, along with that and ADHD and autism combined, I've always had this sense that I was different than most other people, that my brain operated in a different way. I mean, there were nights as a kid that I'd be up at night in my bed, midnight, 1 o'clock, can't sleep because my mind is just going. I'm like, I know this isn't normal. I know, I should be able to just turn things off and go to sleep. I actually had convinced myself at one point in time that I must be mentally handicapped somehow, but my mother was good enough at manipulating my world that she kept it away from me so that everybody knew but me, or something like that.
Okay. Can I ask, when you say you felt like your mom manipulated that, do you say that in like a negative context?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, to me it was, that was how I made sense of it. I was like, okay, how would everybody know this but not tell me, and then kind of dance around it my entire life? The only person I could think of that could possibly have that much control in my life would be my mother.
Okay. So it was like,
and she was doing it to more protect me than anything else in my head.
It was your way of finding like you're trying to find an answer to it.
Right. And I'm,
Okay.
8, 9, 10 years old.
How did you cope with the sleeping problem back then? Do you remember like trying to do anything, or just kind of like fought it? Every night you'd be up late and fought it?
As a kid, my sleep was all over the place. So yeah, I would fight it. I could never wake up in the morning. I was always late to school, things like that. I would sleepwalk at night when I was a kid. Yeah, all sorts of different stuff.
Okay. Is that something that resolved as you got older, or you learned to deal with better as you got older?
So sleepwalking faded as I got older. I haven't slept walk in years as far as I'm aware. And I'm sorry, remind me of the second part of that question.
Oh, did it fade for you as you got older into your teenage years, where like the sleep got easier and you're able to like get yourself to sleep?
Right. So
nights.
The sleepwalking faded. Me getting to sleep easier didn't, which led me to working second shift for about 8 years after high school. And it's only been in the last 2 or 3 years that I've really focused on like circadian rhythm practices and focusing on my sleep health. And I mean, now I wake up between 7 and 7:30 in the morning with no alarm, and I'm well rested and feeling good.
Do you feel like back then, like, would you notice fluctuations in sleep, even just from like stressful events in life or things going on?
I can't pinpoint that in particular. There were a few sleepwalking episodes that got associated with like movies that I would watch or something like that. But I mean, it would just be weird and seemingly out of the blue. I remember my dad telling me one story where, and I want to say I was maybe in 7th grade or so, and I was laying on the couch, he's sitting in his chair, we're watching TV in the family room, and it's bedtime, so I get up and I go to my room, and about 20 minutes later, I come out of my room and I stand in the doorway of the family room and I just stare at my dad. Don't say a word. And he acknowledges me. He's like, Justin, are you okay? Is everything all right? Again, I don't say a word, and I walk over by him and I kneel down next to his chair and I straighten the newspapers that were on the floor, and I get up and I go back to bed. No idea why. There was no, nightmare or anything associated with it. It just happened from time to time.
Okay. So like during these years where like sleep was hard for you, I mean, was this something that was all like you felt like was constantly affecting like your mood, energy levels outside of it? Because obviously if you're not sleeping well as a teenage kid, you're probably suffering some other consequences of it.
I mean, the first half of my day definitely suffered consequences of it. Again, I was, fighting truancy tickets and things like that in high school because I would have a hard time getting to class. I figured out, okay, that last bell rang at 7:15. So as long as I made it past the administration's office by 7:15, I could get to class without getting caught and not get in trouble for not being there on time. And so, I played the game, got as much sleep as I could, and, did what I could otherwise. I was, I didn't sacrifice my social life. I was still going over to friends' houses and partying and doing what kids do.
Okay. So I want to get back to something that we talked about a little bit earlier here, which is that you and your dad's relationship got better when you got older, but meaning that when you were younger, you guys had tension and there was
Right.
a lot of rift between you guys' relationship. Did your brother, also have any of that tension with your brother?
Definitely.
With your dad? Sorry.
Definitely. So my dad, when I was in 7th grade, 8th grade, had a heart episode. Long story short, it ended up being a heart afibrillation, which is somewhat common now, but it caused a mood imbalance in him. It caused essentially him to get angry when his heart would go into afibrillation. So up until I was in 7th grade or so, my dad was a very angry person. He kind of taught me the person I never wanted to be. Then, being 12, 13 years old, I get told, hey, your dad is sick. And we found out that his sickness is actually related to why he's acting the way he's acting. And he shouldn't be acting that way anymore. And to have all that teenage angst and then have somebody tell you, it's not his fault. You got to learn how to forgive him, and that's what my teenage years were. It was learning how to kind of patch that up, and letting things go was a big part of that. And, I talk about it being very impactful in my life, but my brother's 5.5 years older than me. He was just about an adult when all that happened. And he faced the brunt force of what my dad put out during those years.
Do you feel like how long did it take you to start forgiving him? Because I'm guessing you first heard this news and you probably it's not like you felt feelings of forgiveness.
Oh, it took a few years.
Okay.
And even years later, there were struggles and things like that. And my dad and I still butt heads from time to time, but now I think it's more in a normal, somewhat healthy way.
Okay. During that time when you would butt heads with your dad before the diagnosis, how was your relationship with your mom? And would your mom try to interject a lot? Was there a lot of her trying to really, curate these fights that would happen that, to try to pull them back and get you guys not to be butting heads?
Yeah, my mom is the fixer in the family, definitely. And being the youngest in the family, of course, she would do what she could to protect me from what she was able to.
Okay. When your dad was diagnosed then and you guys got this news, do you remember how your mom handled that? How did she go,
I mean, it was stressful for everybody. My dad almost died during that time. He was in a coma for, I don't remember if it was a few days or a couple weeks, and in and out of the ICU and in and out of the hospital. I remember there was one time they stabilized him. They weren't quite sure what was wrong with him yet, but they had him stable. He seemed good for a day or so, and they let him go home. And the next day, my mom's at work, I'm at school, my brother's at school, and my dad's chest starts feeling funny. And so he took it upon himself to drive to the hospital. And he got there, walked into the emergency room, they checked him in, and I'm not a medical person, they do some kind of test to rate your level of function of your heart. It's like a 1 to 10 scale. Most people are operating at a 7 or 8. My dad walked in at a 3 or a 4. And they said most people aren't conscious if you're under a 5. So the fact that he drove there is kind of a miracle. But, it was a lot of that for about 3.5 months.
Okay. So now getting out of that time, learning forgiveness, do you feel like you have memories of any specific things that helped you get past any of those blocks to actually start truly forgiving him and, start seeing your dad in the light of a lot of adults go through this, right? When they get older, they see their parents as these, they're supposed to tell me how to do everything. They know everything. You get older, you realize your parents don't know everything. You get a little older and you realize, your parents are just kids who grew up themselves. And you get a little older and you realize you have to kind of almost forgive them because you start to realize, they had parents that maybe made some mistakes for them. It starts to be this cycle. Do you remember there was a time where you had that type of acceptance of
I mean, fairly early on, when I was in high school, I went through a kind of like a group class thing. This was actually my true first interaction with introspective type of work, but it was like a weekend retreat, essentially.
Was this a school thing?
No, it was me and a friend did it.
Okay.
And through that, I kind of realized that like there's no changing what was. It happened. And in fact, everything that happened helped me be who I am today. So, if I'm okay with the person I've become, then rather than being upset or holding a grudge against my father for being that way when I was a kid, I should almost be thankful.
Okay. Yeah. Which is, I think, a very healthy approach that lets you kind of get out of a victim mentality and then lets you sit
Right.
more into there's a silver lining. Do I like who I am as a person right now? Do I feel like I'm somebody who can grow? Well, then my past let me be that person.
Right.
Do you and your dad ever talk about this? Like, is there like a
Yes and no.
direct acknowledgement of the past compared to now and all that?
We've had a few conversations about it. The toughest part about that specifically is one of the outlying effects of what my dad went through is some short-term memory loss.
Okay.
So, I mean, me and my dad have had some groundbreaking conversations. I've brought my dad to tears based on what we've talked about. But how much he actually has grasped and remembers to this day, I have no idea. I'll never know. And I'm going to guess probably not.
Okay. Now, do you remember like how your like relationship with your dad and mom affected relationships you had with, significant others from a young age to now with your current life? Like,
No, I mean, when I was in high school and I started bringing girls around, it was after the fact, right? My dad was kind of recovering from what he had gone through during that time. And he was still kind of learning how to be in the public. Like I said, my dad has some short-term memory loss. It's nothing that detrimental. You've met my dad.
yeah,
If you didn't know,
you wouldn't know.
you
Yeah,
wouldn't know.
I wouldn't have known your dad had any memory loss just from interacting with him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But he would almost like get embarrassed and hide away when I would have people over, kids or girls over when I was that age. And even into young adulthood. Now, I mean, Shelby and I have been together we're going on 9 years now. So he's pretty used to her. He's pretty comfortable now.
Okay. Do you notice like the way that how you interact in relationships is defined a little bit by your childhood, how you saw your mom and dad interact with their own relationship?
Yeah. As much as my dad was the type of person he was a good guy too. I mean, he wasn't in AFib all the time, so he wasn't having that issue constantly. So, I mean, he's the reason why I know it's a good idea to bring flowers home every once in a while and that kind of thing.
Like, okay, so like your mom being somebody who your entire life was a fixer, right? Especially when you and your dad would fight. Do you feel like that was something that you seeked out in a partner? Somebody who was like a fixer? And it's been a long time. So I think I might have met your wife once back in the day when you guys started dating. But I can't quite remember. So I can't quite remember her very well. But like, did you feel like there's any like ties between, you get what I mean? Like those personality traits that you look for in partners.
What I looked for in her, I think, was just the stability. She's very stable and knows herself, knows what she wants, and is okay with where she's at in life. And so for me to be able to go out and do the exciting, stressful business things and networking and going to meetings and different parties and things like that, and to be able to come home to somebody that's always there and is just kind of a constant. As far as the fixer thing goes, I feel like I kind of became the fixer. So I didn't really need to look for that in a partner.
Okay. So that was like a character trait that you ended up really adopting within your family dynamic, that you wanted to be somebody that were able to fix other people's problems or help resolve issues for them.
Yeah.
Because I know one thing me and you connected about back in the day is like the idea of being empathetic, which is that like we have a hard time not like almost like noticing and absorbing other people's feelings. I'm not like always the biggest fan of the word empathetic, but I think it's the only way to describe what I sometimes feel. And I think you yourself feels this. Like if you walk into a room and you notice like somebody's sad and like it's somebody special that I know, like I can't ignore it. Like my brain is going off like on, oh my God, that person, like I want to know what's wrong. I want to help them a little bit, Like, and I bet
Right.
I feel like you probably feel that a little bit too.
Regardless of how you feel about the word empath, I'm the type of person where, like, if you started talking to me right now and what you were saying brought you to tears as you were talking to me, I would start crying.
Yes.
I wouldn't be able to stop myself. It would just happen.
Yeah. Like you're very attuned to like picking up emotions like that. Yeah. Or almost like too in tune to it.
It's beyond my control.
Yeah. Your body's just, Like, are you a crier when you watch movies?
Oddly enough, since chemo, yes, I cry a lot easier since I went through cancer treatment.
Okay.
I don't know why. I've tried to kind of dig in and figure out where that comes from. You know, part of me thinks it's from, I mean, I had testicular cancer. I went through some hormone changes. I'm still kind of getting my hormones figured out. So I know that plays a certain role in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a much easier crier now than I was before.
Well, okay, this is a good place to tangent into that now, which is your journey with testicular cancer, recovering from that, being in remission right now, and like what some of the things that opened up for you. And I had another thing I want to talk more about with your wife. And
Sure.
But like let's come back to that. Okay, so can you tell people a little bit more about your diagnosis, when you were diagnosed, and like, give a little more information. We'll dig into it from there.
So in February of 2023, excuse me, I found a lump where it wasn't supposed to be. And I went to the emergency room and they're like, hey, you have a mass. And they only use that word when they're talking about, a couple of things. And so I got the soonest urology appointment I could. And he took one look at me and went, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's cancer. And we should probably operate and just remove your tumor before we even do a biopsy. It is large. We have no idea how long it had been there without me noticing, but time was of the essence. So, I mean, inside of 10 days, I had my first surgery, and then it got shipped off to get analyzed. And then we found out that it wasn't just testicular cancer. It was stage 3 testicular cancer that had spread to my lymphatic system, which I got really lucky. I ended up with the only type of lymphatic cancer that's curable, or at least that's what I read about it. I'm not a doctor, I've been wrong, but I was able to get cured because of my age. I was in the 95 percentile of being fine the whole time. The way I talk about my chemo treatment, I had a port in my chest. I went through 15 weeks of treatment, but it was almost like cancer with training wheels when I hear about some of the other treatment regimens that people go on. During my first week of chemo, I lost 10 pounds. They looked at me and said, if you lose any more weight, we're going to put you on an appetite stimulant. So I decided to just eat whatever I could. If it smelled good, if it sounded good, whatever it was, I would just eat it. So I ended up gaining 30 pounds during chemo. But yeah, then we beat it. And I just had my 21-month remission check and we're still in the clear.
Which is fantastic news.
Yeah, thank you.
Can you talk a little bit more about what that was like for you to get the diagnosis at the time? Like that period between told you're going to have surgery, then like the 10 day, there was a 10-day period when you actually got the surgery to get the lump removed. Like, was that a surreal time? Was that a weird time? Was that a limbo?
Yeah, I was waiting to wake up the whole time. I mean, it was earth shattering though. Everything kind of ceased to matter, Going to my job was even difficult, trying to figure out okay, how can I be effective at work if I should be focusing on my health right now? And that's clearly what's more important. Ultimately, during treatment, because I didn't take much time off of work kind of became a grounding tool for me. It gave me a sense of normalcy when I was going to work, even though I was walking in with no beard and no eyebrows and no hair. It still kind of gave me that sense of normalcy I needed.
Okay. Did you, was there, I guess, let's see. Most young men, we feel so invincible, right? That's the whole thing with testosterone, right? We feel so invincible for so many years. You get into your 20s, sometimes in your late 20s, early 30s, you start getting some back pain and knee pain. You start feeling less invincible. But, this is this is that on such a different level, right? It's not just, I turned 30 and my knees started being cranky. It's you're faced with this health thing that is serious, and it can be fatal, but then at the same time, you felt like you went through something that, like you said, it was cancer training wheels but I'm sure that also didn't set into you were kind of maybe past a couple steps that you got to be in this, I have a 95% chance of survival. while
Right.
maybe you feel like a little bit of scared of
Well,
death.
like I didn't get that 95% chance rating until after my pathology results came back. So from the time I went to the emergency room until about 2 weeks after my first surgery, I had no answers. And it was around a 3-week period. And that was the worst. I mean, I went on anti-anxiety meds for the first time during that time.
Okay, so that was the worst period
Yeah.
of it. Okay, just like the not knowing, the waiting on
For
results.
me, the way that I am, I mean, and I've written about this in my blog, knowledge is comfort. I can handle bad news as long as I know it. The bad news is still better than not knowing. Yeah. You know, if we know, at least we can plan about it.
Okay. When you got the news, I guess, is it like suffice it to say that like there was a little bit of relief that like, you know, your chances were very high.
Yeah.
But like while that relief comes, is there still like well, I'm still battling cancer? Like where's that line of like I'm relieved, but like I still have to go through chemo? And
I mean, it just kind of turned into like, okay, this is just something I got to do, grin and bear it, so to speak. You know, when it did get tough, I had a saying I came up with that I kind of told myself, and it can be triggering for some people, so I apologize ahead of time. But what kept my head above water while I was going through chemo was this idea that I'm either going to be fine or it's not my problem.
okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's like a pacifist way of accepting the world that's not, and it's a stoic way of accepting the world. And I don't think it's wrong, but yeah, some people maybe don't like that perspective, right? Yeah. Or they could look at it morbidly. But
Well, and it does kind of pose a completely different mental hurdle that I had to struggle with. Because like, yeah, I could accept the fact that like, okay, I'm either going to be okay or, you know, it doesn't matter. And what that means is I would ultimately pass. Things wouldn't go well. And my problem would become everybody else's problem.
Yeah.
And that's what I struggled with the most.
Okay. Can you talk about that more? Did you feel like you have to like brunt other people's landing if that was to be like the side things went, you know, like in that sense?
Well, like the best way I can put it is, you know, with my dad getting sick, right? He was fairly young, not as young as I was or as I am, but I got to see what him going through that did to my mom and did to his parents and did to me. And so me going through something just as life-threatening, you know, I knew that's the effect that I was having. I had seen it, I had experienced it, and I didn't like it.
Okay. That's and that would be, again, as somebody who's empathetic, that would be hard to probably like sit there and have to deal with and accept, because you want to be there to fix the problems, right?
Right.
You want to be there and fix your wife's problems. And
well, and that's where me kind of sharing my story, you know, people were very kind of taken back because I was an open book about my experience and what I was going through the entire time, where the normal response to something like a cancer diagnosis is kind of like to retreat and to kind of hermit yourself away. Being that fixer, I felt that if I shared my story openly, it provided comfort for other people, and that helped me feel comfortable too.
which kind of then leads into starting Feronus,
Yeah.
right? So if you want to kind of start talking about that a little bit, where how this process brought you to this place where you wanted to do more involvement in this men's mental health space, and you wanted to, again, like help other people get through their struggles.
Right. So, I mean, first I'll start by saying I've wanted to be a business owner for as long as I can remember. You know, even as a kid, if you asked me what I wanted to do, you know, the answer's changed a lot over the years, but it always was, you know, running my own machine shop, or, you know, being a web designer that's freelancing, or whatever it might be. But I was always kind of my own boss in my mind. So getting hit with a stage 3 cancer diagnosis kind of gives you some motivation to chase after that childhood dream a little bit. So we gave it a shot, and I decided, you know, if I'm going to do it, let's do it right. Let's try and build it around something that is going to make a difference and make things better. For those that don't know, Feronus sells a line of personal care products. That's a beard oil, a shave cream, and a beard wash. And for every unit I sell, I donate $1 to men's mental health services. And so I kind of saw the connection between mental health and personal care. And I also saw that, you know, a lot of the issues, I think, in the world are caused by mental health issues. And so, but there wasn't a lot of people doing things about it. People were talking about it, and it's great that people are talking about it, but to put action behind the words too was something that I really wanted to find a way to do. And so I was like, let's make products that people use already. You know, it's beard oil or shave cream, and let's make it count towards something.
Yeah, which I think is like not enough people talk about it, but we literally all experience it. And mental health probably has its hand in almost every single thing in the world.
Right.
Because every single person operating anything has mental health behind them that's dictating how well they're operating, what they're doing, and then how they're interacting with the world around them. If your mental health's in a good place, you're generally going to interact more positively with the world around you.
Yeah.
If it's negative, you're more likely to negatively interact with the world around you. That really simplifies it down, right? But like,
well, I mean, you can simplify it down even more if you look at, like, I've spent a lot of time in customer service and sales and things like that. And if you're being trained to talk on the phone to somebody else, they'll tell you smile while you speak because it changes your pitch and your tone of voice.
Yeah.
It'll change your inflection and make you more inviting and things like that. Whereas if you are frowning or remaining neutral, you don't come off as inviting. You're not as chipper and things like that.
Yeah. No, I'm a big believer in that. Like your attitude really comes through your sound, whether somebody can see you or not, they can really pick up on it. So one of the things that, when you had reached out to me recently with this idea of Feronus and me kind of start talking is like, wanting to do these like events for mental health, because again, it's this idea that like men don't have as big of a space as I think they could be for them to just like openly discuss mental health, but like not always have to have it be like as clinical either. Because I think some men can be scared off by the clinical aspect of mental health. Yeah. And like, I have opinions about that. I think clinically mental health was originally like designed and made around women in the 50s. That's why mental health started. It was mental health services were an industry to provide for women who were going through some hard times. And
it was that fact that caused it to kind of be this pariah for men through the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, right? That was a woman's thing. You don't focus on your introspective health at all. That's not manly.
Yes. But then as they started to get more towards men, they never really adjusted the way therapies were really provided. And they kept just applying the same principles of how therapy worked for women for men. We're like, man, I think you take a group of men, you go make them do something really physically hard, and they all like share in that camaraderie together. Yeah. They're going to leave that event with fuller cups than they've ever had. They're going to feel happier and more enlightened to want to do more things in their life.
That's what a lot of fraternities are about, things like that.
Yeah, right. And it really is. It's a brotherhood. It's in the Marines, it's in the Army.
Well, and that's where, I mean, even the namesake of kindred, right? The idea that, we're related even though it's not a blood relation, right? We're still both human, we can relate as men, and it's important to take care of one another.
Yeah. Now, where would you ideally like to, do you have a really big dream where if Feronus and Kindred's involvement into men's mental health, do you have a big dream, a big goal you'd really like to get to, where a specific type of involvement into the men's mental health community?
I mean, I would love to daydream about, hosting a symposium or something like that someday. Right now, my goal is to get to my first kind of vendor trade show. I would definitely love to turn it into like a public speaking sort of thing. And I have a lot more planned for Feronus beyond Kindred and men's mental health. I mean, it's definitely kind of my flagstone or flagship thing. It's what I'm most comfortable with. I mean, I started making my own beard products during COVID, and that's where the personal care side of things originated from. But it's an interesting journey.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's get back to the other thought I had earlier before we got into Feronus, which was, we were talking about your wife. And one of the things I would say about my mental health journey is I thought I was on some mental health journey of trying to improve it, whatever, but I really wasn't until I met my wife and then I had the rock that is my wife in my life that allowed me to actually start working on my mental health. Until then, I don't know what the hell I was doing till then. I was just, trying to find ways to be more productive and improve my mood and blah, blah, blah. So what I want to kind of get at is, your wife, you've known her for 9 years. You guys have been knowing each other for 9 years and been married for 2 years, year?
Not even a year. We got
Not-
married in January.
That's right. Okay, not even a year.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me more about, for you, this realization about your mental health? Because even for you, ADHD was something you got diagnosed with 4 years ago? What-
Oh, no. I got diagnosed with ADHD when I was 19, 20.
Okay.
It was right after. So after high school, I went to UW Parkside for a year. And then, long story short, I dropped out and I got an apartment with some friends shortly after. And it was during that time that my brother called me and said, "Hey, I just got diagnosed with ADHD. You've talked to me about some of the same things that I have dealt with. You might want to go look into this." And so that's when I made the phone call to my mom. Hey, yes, I was 19, making a phone call to my mom, asking for a doctor's appointment. But that's what we did. And yeah, a few months later, I had my diagnosis and my first prescription, and now we're here.
Can you talk a little bit more about that for you? Like this realization that you had ADHD and like what struggles you might have been facing before that maybe gave you a little bit of an explanation for them?
Well, I mean, I finally felt like I had some sort of explanation. I had felt that there was something wrong with my brain since I was 7, 8, 9 years old. So for somebody to finally tell me there's some legitimacy to those feelings and there's help for that feeling is even better. What was unfortunate is ADHD at the time, this was 2012 or so, ADHD wasn't exactly 100% solidly believed in amongst doctors. And my doctor was the type that didn't really believe that ADHD was real. And so it took some strong arming by my mother to convince him to have me tested for it. And then I went through my testing, and even my test results came back. I remember, again, I was 19. My mom was with me, although she didn't need to be. And the psychiatrist talked to her like I wasn't in the room. Her first question to her was, "Do you think your son has a God complex?" Because apparently, and this is where what exactly my mental health is and isn't is still up to debate, they curved my mental health evaluation. Apparently, I tested high for everything, except I tested extremely high for ADHD. So they said if we set his base level higher and just make that high level normal, then he only has moderate ADHD. And that's where the potentiality of me being on the autism spectrum comes into play.
Yeah. Okay, like you alluded to this earlier, which is the fact that like, even if you're officially or not officially diagnosed with autism, it doesn't really change the fact that you've lived most of your life not having that label, and that having the label could be good, but also like if you're not going to do anything like that, having that label doesn't mean you're going to now take this, specific medication that you needed. Like if you have high blood pressure specifically, and like
Right.
you need that label so you get the high blood pressure medication. Autism's a little different. You're not going to take an anti-autism pill. Like,
Right.
So what I'm trying to get at with this question is, nowadays, I think a lot of people are realizing that, yeah, autism is this big scale, and you can fall anywhere on the scale. Like it's not just a 1 or 0. You can
Right.
kind of have some autism. You can kind of have a high level of it where your brain cannot process input, period.
And the science is so new on both ADHD and autism. I really like to remind people, I mean, it wasn't until 2020 that science commonly accepted the idea that ADHD also affected women. Prior to 2020, it was commonly believed that it was, at least in medical books, it was believed that ADHD was a male-only disease.
Rowdy little boys.
And the studies on the relationship between ADHD and autism comorbidly existing has only been done in the last 3 years. So, a lot of this is subject to change, is hearsay, is, just theorized right now.
Okay. So what I almost want to get at with this entire point, though, is that they are getting really good at like diagnosing this stuff, right? And like they're seeing the correlations. But like, do you see there's a limit of like, people want these answers and they want these labels, but then if the label doesn't directly mean you're going to get a medication to fix it, do you think some people are relying too much on wanting that label, but then they don't necessarily want to take some of the other steps in life? That's not even the right way to put it. Just people think if like they're having a hard time with things, they want that autism label, they want to like self-diagnose it,
So they can explain it away.
Yeah.
I kind of
like
get that idea.
that level of like how much you needed to explain it. And if you, okay, you could explain it, but if it's not going to help you, do you think it's going to help you? Do you think it's beneficial to like tie to that label a ton? And this is just me asking questions.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm
of
kind of
course.
curious your opinion on that.
So I think it goes both ways. Are there people that, take advantage of the system and adopt labels for the sake of copping out of responsibility or whatever it might be?
Or
Absolutely.
could it be identity? A little bit like this identity politics, right? Like you want to be part of a group, you want to be part of a, and then
that mentality, it exists, and it causes a problem because within the neurodivergent community, there's this phenomenon that's popped up called the cascading effect. And so what typically happens is kind of like me and my brother. I'm the cascade effect of my brother being diagnosed. When you have one person that explores their mental health and gets diagnosed with something or realizes they have an anxiety disorder or whatever it might be, and then they start talking to their friends about it, and then their friends start realizing like, oh, I have a lot of those things too, and they start going to their doctors, and then it starts, people from the outside looking in are like, oh, it's a fad, people are jumping on the train, blah blah blah. But what it was is one person realized it about themselves and made it okay to talk about in their immediate circle. And then once it was okay to talk about, people started realizing that about themselves too. And there's even, I mean, we've talked about, the idea of being an empath. Science has shown us like people give off frequencies. Science is starting to show us that people with neurodivergencies may be more sensitive to those frequencies. And so the idea of being an empath could simply be feeling the vibes of the room quite literally.
Yeah. Like an extra ability to take in something.
Right. And so, it's hard to jump to conclusions one way or the other as far as, are people legitimately seeking this out, or are they jumping onto a fad as a cop-out or as something fun to do or whatever it is? Who knows? For somebody like me, the label was important because before I was ADHD, I was lazy, I was forgetful, I didn't care. I was a pleasure to have in class, but I talked too much. I had all sorts of labels that were really negative. And then I had ADHD and all those went away.
So for you, that really helps you eliminate the negative labels.
Yeah.
So that's a very big positive that like I probably, I don't think I've considered myself as like, okay, if you can, sometimes maybe people associating with that label outside of just this, they want to be maybe identify as part of this group, is that it actually can help you maybe eliminate some self-deprecating thoughts, right?
Definitely.
I'm just lazy. Well, I'm not lazy. You have your brain is differently wired, or
and when you're open about what you're dealing with, the people around you then take that into consideration, or at least they should, right? So if I double book myself on my calendar, people that know me are gonna, they might not be happy with me, but they're gonna be understanding. They'll be like, oh yeah, that's Justin. It happens from time to time. We'll get over it. We'll move past it. So, being open about it has only been beneficial too, because, people do accommodate for you, whether you ask them to or not.
And I mean, the whole concept of this like cascading, I mean, that's why I do this podcast, because my whole hope is that when people hear guys talking about mental health and their own mental health, or people talking about their stories, is they literally just make them rethink their story and be like, oh, maybe like that's not something I considered that might have had an effect on me. Which is literally just a cascading effect. I'm looking for people to realize their own story better by hearing other people's stories spelled out in front of them.
One of the things that I've written about on my blog as well is one of the things that sets humans apart from the rest of the animal kingdom in general is our ability to share our experience with one another and benefit from that shared experience. If humans didn't develop the ability to share their knowledge with the next generation, we wouldn't be where we are today.
For sure.
And by continuing to do that in even more pinpoint or focused approach, like on mental health, what we're doing here should have the same effect.
I completely agree. So then, okay, back to your wife. So you had found that you knew about the ADHD prior when you guys were together. But it sounds like you've been through a lot of growth in the last 5-6 years. I mean, a lot of it came through your obviously cancer treatment and some of like the things that your support, how much your support system helped you through that. But looking back, like, would you say there's been improvements that you made because of having your wife around as opposed to not?
Yes. You know, it's my wife is my second serious relationship. I had an ex-fiance prior to her, and I kind of lost who I was during that relationship. I should also mention when I was first diagnosed with ADHD and prescribed for ADHD, I was only prescribed for about a year and a half. My doctor ended up moving to Florida. I ended up switching to a new doctor, and I hated that doctor even more than I hated my first one. So I just decided, you know what? I went 18 years without the meds. I don't need them. I'm not going to do it. And so I went unmedicated until 2020. And during COVID, when what I thought was seasonal depression didn't go away come springtime, I decided to call my doctor. And I was like, hey, well, actually, I didn't have a doctor. I went online and I found a doctor. And I was like, hey, I want to talk to you about some stuff. And I went in and I was like, I think I'm depressed and I have ADHD. And my research tells me that untreated ADHD can lead to depression, but I don't know what to treat first, the untreated ADHD or the immediate issue, the depression. We treated both, and then about 6 months later, he weaned me off the antidepressants.
Okay. Did you feel like the antidepressants helped at the time?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
And did you have any negative effects from them?
Not that I really noticed.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, I was playing video games and it was COVID. You know, the world was weird.
Yeah, it was a weird time. So probably like comparing to baseline was just hard enough already.
Yeah.
Okay. And like I bring up this wife thing and like the support again, just because I don't know how some of my mental health journey feels like it would have been impossible if I was still single and then I was still like, trying to I'm trying to figure out my mental health, but also like I was always chasing women and like wanted a wife and wanted a girlfriend. So like, I don't know how like those things could have happened simultaneously that like I somehow improved my mental health and made myself a better partner to find the right person that I would have like this idea that you have to make yourself right before you find the right partner instead of like, no, you and another two imperfectly people meet and like just figure out how to make it so that you could have some perfect sense of like life together. That's for you guys. But like,
so this is actually a topic that we kind of got into on my podcast on the episode that aired earlier today, day of recording, of course. But this idea that, you know, you can't pour from an empty cup, right? Your glass has to be filled before you can fill somebody else's glass. And I do like that idea. It makes sense, right? If you're in a hurt place, it's really difficult to help others, right? You should focus on your immediate issues and then focus on the people around you. And as much as I want to wholeheartedly get behind that, I'm kind of a prime example of that's not always the case.
it's not.
And the best way I can sum that up is I met Shelby. I mean, I was Shelby's boss at the time. I was working at Petco. She got hired as a cashier. And I met Shelby about 3 months after my ex-fiance called off our wedding. And we were dating about a month later. And people are like, don't you need time? You're still kind of figuring stuff out. And I'm like, well, I don't want to miss out on the opportunity of what I think might be something really awesome. And if she's cool, she'll let me fix myself in the meantime. And she did. And I was open about that from the get-go too. I was like, hey, just so you know, like this is where I'm at in life. It's not a great place, but I'm working on it. And she stuck by me.
Okay, so I'll share a couple opinions about that entire like subject, and I think you'll kind of agree with them because of what you just said. But yes, I think you're right. You can't pour from an empty cup, but I also think most people's cup isn't as empty as they quite think it is, and that they also don't understand that sometimes helping other people, filling other people's cups can end up inadvertently filling yours without realizing it. On top of this whole fact that like what you just said is wonderful, which is if she's cool, she will give you the space to grow and not expect you to be perfect right off the bat either. And like that is this fundamental idea that you're going to find a partner who's perfect for you,
Right.
It's so stupid.
There is no perfect.
No. You find anybody that you think is perfect and you live with them for a year and you'll start finding out things and they're not perfect about them pretty quickly.
But I have a buddy who just had a woman move in with him. And the way that I described it to him, I was like, for the first couple of months, you're figuring out what level of gross you're each willing to deal with.
Yeah, right. That's literally what it is. What do you accept? Let's try to merge our cleaning habits a little bit. merge your grooming habits, yeah. But I feel like, that's like the fun of it is like you both have to kind of stumble into a better place together.
Right.
And like, I think there's
Well, it takes work. It takes effort from both people. The best way I've heard it put is, because people will say a relationship is 50-50 or, something like that. And a relationship is 60-40 where both partners are trying to be the 60.
Yeah, exactly. And like that continues to pay off so big. And especially when you look back and you can look at the positive changes you've had in your mental health and you can directly attribute them to like the hard times and the good times with your partner. Like that is how you grow with your partner. And me and my wife talk about this a lot. I think couples that end up growing apart is because like they're not intentional about growing together. And whether that's like helping each other get through mental health things in a way that like the person always feels very supported. So when they get through that struggle, they come back to you thinking you're the one that helped them, not they resent you because you didn't help them through that struggle. But it's like that on a micro scale, on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
Those little micro, like your partner all of a sudden like builds this image of you of somebody that's constantly there to support them, maybe sometimes there to support them, or maybe never there to support them. And like mental health 100% correlates with the growth of a relationship for those two people in that relationship. And I think when you see people who get together and then like they're together 5-7 years and then they get divorced, I would almost bet like 100% of the time that both of them have a mental health struggle that they ignored that entire time, or like, didn't talk about, didn't take seriously.
Right.
But having a partner that you could talk to about that stuff, so you could be like, honey, I'm anxious tonight and I can't be there for you tonight.
Right.
Or honey, I'm depressed tonight. It's like, I need you to like, can you give me a little extra?
Well, and I mean, me going through cancer treatment before we got married, there was one night Shelby and I had a conversation and I told her like, hey, this is going to be tough. This is going to be a rough ride. It's going to be stressful. And I gave her an out. I told her, if you don't want to do this, we're not married yet. You could walk away. You could give me that ring back right now. And I won't blame you. And she chose to stay, and that really, I kind of think speaks to what kind of rock she's been for me. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
No, I mean, that's a beautiful gesture that she also like, I'm sure in her mind, she's never doubted staying with you. It's not like in her mind,
well, right.
Just because things got hard,
well, and knowing this, right? Knowing that, she had an out, she chose to stay, right? It's almost like, I feel like we got through the hard times of our marriage before we even got married. There's a lot of things that will test the marriage over the years. Health scares are one of those things. They usually happen way later, but we got to figure that out ahead of time.
Yeah. And that's a cool thing. And I'm guessing you guys' relationship just got all the stronger for it.
Definitely.
All the deeper for it. And like she probably, my guess is she never makes you feel like you can't be open about your mental health with her discuss it with her.
Absolutely.
That was, I mean, it sucks that there are people in situations where maybe they can't open up to their partner about their mental health. But my hope is these conversations continue to like.
And not everybody needs that from their partner either, or wants that from their partner.
That's true. That's true. Now, do you not believe every partner ultimately, though, most people in a relationship would probably benefit to some level of being able to talk about this stuff?
I would think so, but I think it's a spectrum. It's hard to say that everybody, that this is going to be the answer that's going to benefit everybody. It might not, right? And, as long as, if that person isn't, confiding in their partner for their mental health needs, hopefully they have another outlet and they're getting that elsewhere. That's the way that I would look at it. It doesn't have to be limited to your partner. That's actually one of the reasons, or one of the ways that I connected the mental health thing to kindred. For a lot of men, they don't have a lot of female perspective in their life. And the only time that they might open up to a woman might be while they're getting a haircut. And actually, it's kind of a stereotype that people open up to the people cutting their hair.
Yeah.
And so putting that conversation forefront, hey, we're already in a barber shop. This product is going to help men's mental health. And it's because you talk about mental health things to your barber or to your tattoo artist or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like the benefit of getting the words out of your mind sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, you got tattoos. When you're sitting in a tattoo chair for an hour or two, you got to talk to about something with the guy or the woman that's tattooing you.
Yeah.
And I got a half sleep. This is 22 hours worth of work. We got into some deep stuff during this.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like most barbers or stylists who especially have like clientele that they see consistently,
Yep.
they probably know more about that person's life than like some of their friends might even know, because they probably have heard them talk about the deep emotional things that they probably don't even talk about their friends or maybe their partner sometimes.
Exactly.
No, that's a very good point.
I personally believe, that people, these salon stylists, haircutting people, they get confided in a lot, or at least the stereotype is that they are. And I'll play off of that.
Personal trainers, I think, get this a lot too.
Okay, that's good.
Personal trainers always like, because you're training the person, you're lifting with them, multiple times a week.
And
they end up telling you about their entire day and then their life and what's happening in their life.
Getting into exercise and powerlifting specifically, so much of it is a mental game. So it lends itself to talking about mental health very well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, okay. Well, to kind of wrap up the podcast, do you feel like do you have any like remarks you'd like to kind of end on with your perspective, your view of men's mental health here, and like this, like kind of moving forward? Any kind of like closing words you'd like to share?
The thing that I'd like to say about mental health or men's mental health, because a lot of men don't want to acknowledge their mental health. And people, when they hear the term mental health, automatically associate that with the idea of mental health issues or problems. And I'd like to kind of change the way that's talked about. This happened through a conversation with a friend of mine where we were talking about diets. I've been trying to lose weight lately. And, he pointed out, like, a lot of people don't think they are on a diet, but everybody's on a diet. If you don't know what you're eating every day, write down what you eat every day. You'll figure out what your diet is. That's your diet. And the same thing applies to mental health. You don't have to have mental health problems to focus on your mental health. It's not a positive or negative. You have it whether you want it or not. You have your mental health just like you have your physical health. And so to kind of get past that stigma of associating the topic of mental health as this negative trait to have, it needs to be changed.
It's almost like the idea that like you can't just talk about mental health to come back up to baseline. You can also talk about mental health to get above baseline.
Oh, absolutely.
Like how to live a happier, more fulfilled life, how to have better relationships with people around you.
There's another podcast that I listen to called The Secular Buddhist. And one of the ways that he starts out his podcast every episode is you don't have to listen, or you don't have to be Buddhist to listen to this podcast. You don't have to be wanting to become Buddhist to be listening to that podcast. You can listen to that podcast to become a better version of whatever you already are, right? And so it's like, you don't have to have mental health issues to focus on your mental health. You can focus on your mental health to simply become a better version of yourself.
And it usually like pours in up pretty much every facet of your life.
Oh, absolutely.
Every facet, work, relationships.
One thing I do want to circle back before we do wrap up, you brought up the idea of us doing some events. Did you want to expand on that at all?
Yeah. We kind of talked about this a little bit. Me and Justin had a meeting, kind of like seeing how our two, my podcast, his new podcast / like, I guess Feronus is a brand. It's an over-encompassing brand, but like how we might work together. And, some things that we talked about is whether we want to do these like events where perhaps we have a room or a bunch of guys sit around, maybe we talk about stuff. Another idea that got brought up is if we do something physical where, say, we do a physically challenging thing, like we take a bunch of guys to Lake Michigan when the water's cold.
Do a polar plunge.
Yeah, we do a polar plunge, but it would be this event where every guy gets cheered on by everybody to do it. It's trying to get people to do something they're very uncomfortable with and then feel the benefits of doing something hard in a group setting, specifically for men, because I do think that is like some of the cleanest, best therapy men can have is a setting like that.
Somebody once challenged me on this because in one of the older brochures that I used to hand out, I talk about how choosing kindred is choosing to take care of your community. And she's like, you only donate to men's mental health services. How can you say you're taking care of the whole community if you're only focusing on men's mental health? And I said, well, like I've looked for places to donate to. And actually this will be a call out. If you're a men's mental health organization that's looking for donations, I'm looking for you. It is difficult to find organizations that are solely men focused. There are plenty of places for men to go. I'm not trying to complain about that. But as far as the specialty places to go, there are places for people of color, underprivileged youth, LGBTQIA, women, Hispanic, Black, every kind of subsection seems to have a resource that's dedicated to them, but men. And when you look at the statistics, men seem to need the majority of the support. Again, there's plenty of resources for us to go to, but it's not dedicated resources.
Yeah. Yeah. Which these events, I guess we kind of wanted to maybe make it a bit of a resource for men where it would perhaps give them an opportunity to get something out, something, whether it's energy, mental energy, whatever. But so that was kind of the idea of some of these events. Did you want to add more to that?
It was just this idea of, building camaraderie, knowing, literally you're not alone when you're showing up in a group together.
Yeah.
And understanding before you show up that you're all showing up for a similar reason, for a common purpose.
Yeah. Now, a big thing too, I should mention with Feronus and you guys are kind of very Waukesha based, right? You mentioned this, that you guys are very Waukesha heavy. Your partner on your podcast, Rico Camacho, him being a Waukesha alderman.
Yep, in District 15.
District 15. I mean, you guys are very Waukesha heavy, which I like because for me, I'm a big believer in communities first. As much as I'd love to help somebody in California, I want to help people in Milwaukee and around me first, because I think that's going to have more direct on my community around me.
Well, it's the grassroots approach. I'm not the only person in the world that can start a brand that does something like this, right? And so it's much easier to focus small than it is to focus big, especially when you're starting out. So by focusing locally, we can more than likely be more effective in what we're trying to do, and maybe along the way inspire others to do the same thing. And if they don't, hopefully we grow to the point where we can start, focusing on things in other areas or across the country.
Yeah. But it has to start locally. It kind of has to start with building up this community directly around you for that community to actually grow.
Right.
And it's starting to see the impact you could possibly have other places. But so that's kind of that's the big idea, I think, behind us doing some events here. And this is something we're going to continue to talk about as we move forward. That I think I'm really looking forward to. I think
me too.
Doing some events. I want to get more men in this area involved with this, and I think it'd be so fun to do this stuff in person and get to,
absolutely
get a group setting of this thing, because I think it'd be healing in fun ways. I think it'd be just fun in a lot of great ways. I think it would be something that people will want to come back to. I think it could be something that people would look forward to, something that men will look forward to in this way that it could be I don't know, I wish I could tell every guy, go do a meditation retreat, including myself. I wish I could just go do a 10-day meditation retreat sometimes, right. Experience something. But this could be a version of a mini little thing that we do here in Milwaukee. Like I said, even if it's a cold plunge thing, but the atmosphere we could build around it, the energy we can build around it.
So many different ways that we can take it. The first thing that comes to my mind locally in Waukesha, and I'd have to talk to my buddy Alfie, shout out to Alfie, but going to an axe throwing bar or something as a group.
Yeah.
And maybe considering, the topic of it being mental health, make it like a sober event sort of thing.
Yeah.
And not all of them have to be men only. We can start incorporating, it's important to bring your families to this sort of stuff. You should be able to talk to them, or, maybe do a father-daughter sort of thing. It's important to build those connections, especially on this topic.
I agree. Men's mental health is kind of for me, a big entry point into a lot of this stuff, especially this podcast. But ultimately, someday I hope to be able to provide more than just a men's mental health thing. Because you're right. I mean, someday it's a thing that entire family could possibly benefit from, and it'd be cool if we were doing community stuff that was entirely family based as well.
And to get back to what I was kind of saying before with that challenge about, is taking care of men's mental health only taking care of men, or is it taking care of the community? I mean, if dad has an easier access to mental health, or if there's less stigma for him to seek services, will the entire family grow up in a more healthy home? Yeah. Will his children grow up knowing how to talk about those topics and handle those topics better? Absolutely.
Yeah. Could not agree more. Yeah, I think it's something that would continue to feed into the family for generations to come, because of the effect that it has on generations to come.
And the example I used then, I was like, okay, think of your classmate who's a guy, right? Have you ever seen him get angry? Can he get a little testy sometimes? What if he had access to mental health services early on in childhood and learned how to handle himself and express himself in a healthy way? Do you think the people around him, do you think the girls in his class would feel safer when he gets upset about something? Probably.
Yeah. 100. Could not agree more. Could not agree more. Well, okay. I think
That was a lot.
that was a lot. This was great. I'm really appreciate you coming here and for us to kind of get in this conversation. And I'm really looking forward to what we can do. You know, whether even if we don't end up getting an event off this year, I still believe we can. But like, I look forward. I think this is an area where I don't want to like stop putting my time into it. I know it's an area you're never going to stop putting your time into. So I think we have a bright future of some things we can do.
It's just the beginning.
Directly in this community. Yeah. So
absolutely.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Unturned Stones. If you want to give a couple shout outs to your Facebook pages, Instagram pages for Feronus and stuff.
The easiest one is the company website, www.feronus.com. That's Feronus. I'm sure it'll be in the description or something.
Yep.
From there, you can get to Instagram, Facebook. We're on YouTube. Our podcast is Spotify, YouTube Music, Apple Music, pretty much everywhere.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for tuning in for another episode. Continue trying to get some more episodes recorded here and some more content put out. Otherwise, thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.